right, hello and welcome everybody. You're about to be hot dipped. Boy, you are in for a treat today. We are joined by the legendary Glasgow Yellow Jacket, Coach Mick Cropp. How you doing today, Mick?
I'm good, Jason. I wouldn't call myself legendary. Mr. Literal is legendary. I'm just after him.
Well, I'm glad you brought up Coach Littrell. Maybe that's a good place to start. In terms of coaching style, would you say you've patterned yourself after him, or he influenced you at all, or do you kind of have your own unique coaching style?
I think a little bit of everything. The thing with Mr. Literal was he was very good at his strategy about putting players in positions to be successful. He knew his players and he knew what their strengths and weaknesses were, and he kind of tailored what he wanted to do. Now he had something he liked to do pretty much every year, but he liked to get his kids. His kids would always just go through a brick wall for him. I know that's a cliche, but I really think a lot of his kids were very, very dedicated to him, and I think our kids are very dedicated. We have a lot of good kids. We've had a lot of good kids through the years, and try and do that on our level, the class one, class two level. You got to really put your program is there, but you got to kind of tailor what you want to do to your players that are there. You can't have your offense or defense exactly for your kids, and everybody's got to fit your style. You got to go to the style because sometimes we've got a team that's fast and not very big, and then sometimes we have kids that are big and not terribly fast. So, and that was really the difference. Once we got through 2008, 2009 with a really good group that went to back-to-back Final Fours, we were run and jump. We were man-to-man all over the place, up and down, lots of possessions. Then after they left, we were big and we were very slow. We won games in the 30s. We played a lot of half-court defense. We took care of the basketball. So, that was one thing Mr. Littrell was and that I try and be is we go to the players and not try and fit the players into what we want to do every single year.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned about literal having people that would run through a brick wall for him. I agree with that, by the way. But Jay Thompson was on here not long ago, and he was talking about how he really enjoyed playing for you because same thing that everybody would just do anything for you because they really respected you and liked playing for you.
Well, I appreciate that. And I think I try and think, even it doesn't matter if I'm working with an 8-year-old in softball or pickleball or baseball like this morning, or I'm working with a high school kid at 6:30 this morning. I want to be, I want to coach the kids like I feel like I would want to be coached. And I think that helps a lot. I want kids to, I kind of want to have a good, well, that's one thing that helps. We start coaching these kids when they're 8 years old up until for 10 years till they're 18. Coach them in junior high and in high school and little league. And, so we have a pretty good feel for how they are. So I understand what kind of drives them and what each kid needs to, how they need to be coached. So I think that helps out a lot.
You bet. Now, do you remember the moment? Because I remember driving through town, with my dad growing up. You'd always be out there shooting, kind of like Chad Crane was always out there shooting hoops. Do you remember when you fell in love with basketball? Did you always love the game, or was there a moment?
Well, I think I've just always. I think there's pictures of me somewhere in with a suction basketball cup in my crib. My dad was an all-state player here. My mom is a retired teacher, so I think the basketball school life was always in my blood. I played basketball. That's all I really wanted to do in high school. I didn't spend as much time as what I needed to or should have on the academic side of it, and so that's all I've do and think about for 50 years.
Yeah, and everybody, rightfully so, remembers you as the basketball player and the coach. But I remember you played the other sports too. I remember watching you pitch some as a baseball player. And did you run track too, or?
Yep, we ran track, played baseball as mostly pitcher, shortstop, ran track, was high jumper, not high jump anymore, but we won a state gold medal in the 4x4,
Wow.
won medals in the 4x2, both my junior and senior year, and just really just try to do everything I could.
Absolutely. And do you think that helps athletes if they're a multi-sport athlete? Does that make them better at their favorite sport per se, or do you think it's better when a kid focuses just on the one sport?
No, I don't think you'll find many people, especially you watch professional athletes and look at them, and almost all across the board multi-sport athletes. And it definitely makes you stronger. I try and get as many kids out for track and stuff because it makes you so much stronger and so much better. And I didn't do track my sophomore year, and I kind of regretted it. But I think the more sports you can do and the more active you can be, the better off you're going to be.
Yeah, you bet. No, I spent a lot of time reflecting on the different teams I've watched at Glasgow over the years, and we've been blessed with so many amazing teams over the years. But I really, one of my favorite teams are the teams you played on. I think about the guards, you and Jimmy Herford. I think about Big Mike Hagedorn down low, and I'm going to forget some names, but like people like Mark Teese and Mike Best, Kendrick Davis, and what do you remember about your playing days?
Well, my sophomore year was the first year that I played on the varsity level. We had a good group of seniors. Mike Meyer, Doug Hackman, Jason Sanders, Lance Jennings was a really good
Oh yeah,
basketball player. Those guys were seniors. So, and then like you said, Jimmy Herford was in my class. Justin McMillan was in my class. They kind of got some varsity time that year. I'd come in occasionally off the bench as a sophomore, and so we lost all those seniors. That's going into my junior year, and we were the 7th seed in the Glasgow tournament, and
that
up,
seems criminal. Sorry to
yeah,
interrupt you.
upset the number 2 seed New Franklin in the first round. Had snow that week, so we got pushed back, and we played the semifinals against um, Keatsville on a Friday night and beat them. They were the 3 seed, and then beat Fayette in a championship game on Saturday. And I remember also Mr. Rook had passed away at that time, and we had his funeral that morning. So we had games all day long, starting at noon. And I remember as people were leaving the funeral, the Western girls were coming in to play their game there. So it was a hectic week. But we had a good group of kids in my class that, like you said, Jimmy, Justin, Mark Teese, Matt Teese, and I'm probably going to forget some names. Michael Hagedorn was the MVP of the conference our senior year. He's a really good player. Shannon Hubbard. We had a good group of guys that we kind of played together as we came up quite a bit. So that really was good for us to kind of step right in as juniors and play a lot of minutes. So that was pretty exciting for us to kind of come from nowhere right away and get a big win. I think we won 20 games that year, over 20 games that year, won a district championship, won the next game, which was regionals at the time, lost to New Bloomfield in the sectionals, who ended up going to the Final Four. Then the next year came back. And the funny thing about it was that year, us and Harrisburg played in the district championship, and they didn't have hardly any seniors either. We had Mike Best was a senior. So we played them again the next year, and unfortunately they got us the next year. So in the district championship. So it was kind of two teams on the same level, not losing anybody. And, we got them one year, they got us the next.
Man, there were some battles back then. You mentioned a couple of the teams, like New Franklin seems like they were always good back then, and Fayette had some really good teams. I kind of remember some good battles with Boonville. Am I remembering that
Yep,
right?
yep,
Like they had
yep.
a kid that could shoot the long distance three like you and Jimmy could.
Yeah, they had several good players. A kid by the name of Brian Rolls, he was a guard. They had some good. A Luscombe kid was a big kid, I believe. And I know I can't remember all the names, but they had some good teams. We'd play them regular season at that time. That was a non-conference game, and then we usually see them possibly in a Fayette tournament, and they were in a Slater tournament at that time. So we would possibly play them 3 times, and yeah, we would usually battle with them.
Man, that Slater tournament just over the years has been a tough tournament, hasn't it?
Oh yeah, I think through 2016, 17, up until that point, we started here at Glasgow in '02, and I always kind of had made the joke to Greg Schmidt, the KMMO guy, that we have more state trophies than Slater tournament trophies, and that's not even a lie. That was pretty much the way it was. You really had to play well, and even if you played well, you might not come out of there with 2 wins, but you came out better. That is for sure.
100%. And are you one of those coaches that likes to play those tough games during the regular season, even if your record's maybe not quite as good? Or do you like to, play just the regular slate of teams?
Well, I like to play as many tough teams as possible. Our schedule has been kind of set, with 10 conference games, and the 3 tournaments we're in. But the 3 tournaments we're in are tough. You got the Glasgow tournament, which is always tough. You got the Salisbury tournament now, which has been good. There's a lot of good teams in there. Always Salisbury's solid on their home floor for sure. And then you got the Slater tournament, which has been a juggernaut for a long time. So, yeah, we like to schedule some games for sure that are going to challenge us and push us and make us better.
You bet. Now, I spent a lot of time. I was blessed to spend a lot of time with Coach Littrell. growing up, off the court, helping out with a summer program just like you do these days. And we always talked about some of the other coaches. When I was in high school, we talked about, and back then you couldn't talk about other coaches, it felt like, without bringing up Earl Spratt from New Franklin. What do you remember about him?
Patience.
Mm.
I mean, yeah, they were going to take a good shot. They were going to play tough defense. I think him and Mr. Littrell were some big influences on me because, growing up obviously with Mr. Littrell and then Coach Spratt being in the conference all those years, those guys, that's kind of what we want to do. We want to a lot of times we want to take. Obviously, everybody wants to take a good shot, but those guys took a lot of good shots. That's just kind of the way they were. My buddy Jim Schlotzhauer at New Franklin, who's been a coach and a good coach, he would always talk about playing for Spratt, and then there was no quick shots.
Mm-mm.
It was take your time, methodical, take a good shot, make the defense work, and then play really good defense on the other end.
They were definitely fundamentally sound. They wouldn't beat themselves, would they?
No, they and that's kind of carried over through the years. I mean, they've had a lot of good coaches come through there through the years especially since I've been there. And they all have been pretty much the same. They're kids, and they're a lot like Glasgow. They have the same kids. The Chitwoods and the kids that are coming through. They have some Bishop kids that are really solid. Lots of good kids that come through there that have been taught from the ground up how to play the right way.
Yeah. Do you remember the name of the big guy that played at New Franklin all those years ago, Casey Utterback?
Yeah, yeah.
He was a good ball player, wasn't he?
Yeah, I just actually Sunday drove home and went through 87. I believe he used to live on 87. And I was thinking, I remember him from the other days. And that was kind of in the time where I was between high school and
Right.
college. So I didn't see him get to play a whole lot. So I did see him several times. And, yeah, he was a very good basketball player.
All right. You said basketball was always important to you, even in high school. Just like the rest of us, maybe we could have done a better job focusing on academics. But did you always know you wanted to be a coach?
I think so. I don't. I believe so. I know Mr. Littrell has got a quote in one of the papers, newspaper clippings, said, "I'm like a coach on a floor," and I think that kind of always stuck with me. To where I was pretty inquisitive in practice a lot of times, and wondering why. Maybe he might not have liked it, but wondering why we were doing this and why we were doing that. And I know I've had some kids ask me that, and I'm because I said so, But that's kind of where my mind was all the time, and I've always watched basketball through the eyes, I think, of somebody that was probably going to be coaching.
So if you knew you wanted to be a coach or an educator, and maybe some folks watching this podcast are thinking to themselves, man, I'd like to follow in Mick's footsteps. I'd like to do what he did. What's your advice to that person?
Uh, get as much experience as you can in a classroom. If you want to be a teacher in a classroom, and as much experience as you can on the sideline, because it may seem easy, it's not. I mean, it's when you're there and you're expected to lead a group of kids, it's a lot different than sitting up in the stands. It just is.
Yeah, 100%. So where did you go to college?
I went to Warrensburg. Went to Warrensburg and graduated in 2000, and student taught at Sweet Springs in that fall, and started coaching right away. They asked me in the summer of 2000 to come up and have a meeting, and I did, and they wanted me to be assistant volleyball coach. So they said, "Hey, we'll pay you." I was like, "Hey, all right." So got started on some volleyball, and then halfway through the first semester there in 2000, their football coach was having a good season, and he was a junior high basketball coach, and they said he didn't want to do it anymore. The principal came talk to me and said, "Would you like to do it? We'll pay you." I said, "Hey, bring it on." So I coached junior high basketball there, and then actually ended up taking a girls program over in the middle of the year, and the superintendent said they'd like for me to take it over, and I did, and they said they'll pay you, and I said that's fine, and actually graduated in December of 2000 from Warrensburg, and was the volunteer assistant for Coach Bisher out here in that next semester, and then got the job in Moberly. Then I was assistant junior high football coach, and I taught K through 2 PE for that year, the 2001-2002 school year. I was the assistant varsity basketball coach and head JV boys basketball coach at Moberly, and then got the job here at Glasgow in '02, and been going ever since.
Wow, '02. So Sweet Springs, been over at Moberly, and now at Glasgow, and it's got to feel good to come home, doesn't it?
It was scary. I'll be
Scary.
honest with you. I was pretty nervous, and I think that fear has drove me even to this day. I didn't want to come home and fail. To be honest with you, I was nervous. I had never been a head coach before, and I thought I knew a lot going into my student teaching and my basketball coaching there, and then found out I didn't. And I thought I knew a lot as a JV coach, and I didn't. And I thought I knew a lot as a first couple year coach, and I didn't. And probably in 10 years from now, I'll be like, I thought I knew a lot as a 25-year coach, and I probably don't. So that's the thing, is just keep learning and keep up with the game, and that's the biggest thing that I've tried to do for 26, 27 years now.
Well, it feels like those that are most successful, whether it's coaching or managing, it's all the same as people, do have a commitment to continuous improvement. Because I think when you think you have it all figured out, is about the time you're getting ready to get clocked, and so some teams are getting ready to beat you pretty good. I think if you get arrogant and stuff, and I've never had that about you. You've always seemed like a guy that's committed to getting better and improving, even though you've had so much success.
Yeah, I mean, I think I feel like not only that, but like if you're satisfied with your success, you're about to get clocked. And I don't, and I feel like if I ever get to the point to where I don't want to get better, then I probably need to let somebody else do the job. But I'm not that point yet.
Wow.
I love the game of basketball, and it's evolved so much even in the last 10, 12, 15 years, that it's so much fun to coach and to learn about, and it's just never stop learning about it,
That's
finding
true.
something else, little wrinkle here, wrinkle there, and can it fit with our team, and can it not fit with our team? Do I have the personnel for that? Do we not have the person? It's just, I mean, in the internet, the Twitter and the TikTok for old people, Facebook Reels, you get on that all the time and look at stuff, and it's just, it's a lot of fun.
Do you know what your all-time record is? It's got to be impressive.
I think the kids had a really good game on 487 times, and I was not great 172 times. So
Huh.
487 and 172 or something like that.
That's pretty impressive. And how many trips to the Final Four?
Six as the head
6.
coach, and then two assistant with Molly, Coach Monning on the girls' side.
She's done a remarkable job
Oh,
too, hasn't she?
she's done a great job. She does a great job. She works incredibly hard to prepare her girls every single day, every single game. Great game plans. Girls execute it really well. She gives her team a chance to win every single game, and she does that because she gives her team a chance to win every single day in practice. I mean, I see it every single day. I mean, she is locked in.
I was talking to Jay Thompson when he was on here about his sister Molly and about the team that she played on and won the state title. And I know that's right in the middle of when you're graduating college and getting started in your career. But did you get to see that team much? And if so, what do you remember about that
I
team?
did a lot. I did watch quite a bit, and then the next year, or one of the years, I kind of was doing the scouting for them. Some of the scouting, Mr. Reynolds had reached out and wanted me to do a little scouting for them. I think they might have lost that game, so it could have been my fault. But no, they were very, very. They had the right pieces in the right spots, and they just fit really well together. They had a really good defense that they played over three-quarter court. They had length, they had speed. Mrs. Cotman was good on the back end, and they had shooters. So they just had a complete package, a complete team that really, I wasn't around them a ton, but just really loved playing with each other and played well off of each other.
They seem to have an identity, and I think this is true of a lot of Glasgow teams. But I want to get your thoughts. Kind of a blue collar mentality. That ball's on the floor. We're gonna get it. You're not beating me to that ball. Just gritty and tough. Would you agree with that? Do you think that's kind of a Glasgow thing?
I think so. When I first, they were really good about that. And when our first couple years here, I had a good group: Philip Normeyer, Chad Westhughes, Grant Tees, Glenn Conroe. I'm going to forget some names here as I go. Michael Freeze was Tyler Polson, Dan Parks. A lot of those kids that played around there, they were extremely blue collar, and they were hardworking. They were not going to be outworked. That is for sure. And yeah, that's a lot of our kids are like that.
Very nice. And I always tell people one of my other favorite girls basketball teams of all time is approximately your time when we had Carla Bean and Jesse and Leslie and that team that was a really good team too, wasn't it?
Yeah, and they were kind of the same way. They had some height. They had some shooters. They had girls that could handle the basketball and play good defense, and they had a good identity too. They knew their roles. That was a good thing about them. They knew what they needed to do. They knew their roles, and they executed it very well.
And lately, it seems like the districts out here. I've had the pleasure of coming out here and watching district. You've been 2A lately. I know sometimes Glasgow's 1A and 2A, but that's been a tough district with those teams, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's pretty normal for the winner of our district to go to the Final Four. I mean, you had Salisbury a few years ago making their runs. West Strand was one game short of it last year. So it's a district that if you win it, you got a pretty good shot to make it to the Final Four. So it's really tough. And all of our sports here recently have been very tough district wise. Our girls softball team the last few years have been really really good and really fun to watch. And they've been matched up. I think it was last year in the semifinals. We had four of the top 8 teams ranked in the state playing in the semifinals. We basically had a Final Four here.
Wow.
And so it's a lot of fun. Unfortunately, our girls didn't win it, but I mean, you're in a district with the defending state champ who also went ahead and won the state championship last year as well. So it's that way. Baseball's been in a tough district a lot of times. So yeah, it's tough. It's tough.
There's a lot of teams around here that win at a high level in there.
Yeah, there really is. There really is.
Nice. So I want to talk for a moment about coaching trees. I feel like you've got a lot of folks that you've mentored and led throughout the years that are now doing the same thing for young men and women. Can you just describe that for a moment?
Uh, I think, well, you go back all the way to the '09 to 12 teams, and you got Dustin Young, who's now the coach at CMU for the women's team and really does a good job over there. Dylan, his brother, does a good job at Pilot Grove. That 2012 third place team, I think that's probably one of my proudest teams just for this reason, was 4 of the 5 starters were at one time or are our basketball coaches.
Wow.
Yeah, you had Blake Hackman, who's at Boonville now. He was a point guard. Jay Thompson, who was at Jamestown for a while and was a really good basketball coach. You had Reed Littrell, who helped me out for a while, and Dylan, who is at Pilot Grove now and has been, has won some district championships. So that group has been good, really good. So we've had a lot of good guys coming. I've even had some student teachers that have gone on to and be, Coach Matthews at Cairo. He's been to the Final Four. Coach Cook at Salisbury. He was a student teacher of mine and really like to keep up with him and the job he does. He does a good job. So I had a lot of guys that have came through and awful proud of them, for how they've gone. Kenny Davis was another one that went on and is in education and doing some coaching. So, I like to think that those guys had some influence on those guys.
You bet. Now, even before your time, I don't know how much you know about other Glasgow players that became coaches. Didn't Tracy Bottoms do that?
Yep.
And you know some others that were really successful coaches that came from Glasgow?
Tracy, and he kind of turned to the administration field and was a good administrator. Has done a nice job being a good administrator. And I don't remember a lot others from around my time, so I don't know if you do or not, but I can't think of any right off the top of my head.
That was the one that kind of stood out. I remember Tracy liked to shoot from the outside too a little bit.
Yeah, he's a North Carolina fan.
Yeah.
I remember that. He was a senior when I was a sophomore. He was also in that good senior class that year.
Nice. How would you describe Coach Reynolds' style back when he coached? Because he was the head coach, I think, of that state championship girls team.
I think he's a lot like Mr. Littrell. Knew his team, knew what needed to be successful. Both of them. I don't know if I said this earlier, but I think about when I first came to Glasgow and Mr. Reynolds was the girls' coach. They just took advantage of matchups so well, and they had the offense that we ran when I was in high school, the one that Mr. Littrell ran, the one that Mr. Reynolds ended up running. Molly even does some of it occasionally, was where you could isolate people and put them in to situations to where they could take advantage. And we do that. We did that a lot last year with Jackson Meyer, who averaged 27 points a game, and he was a nightmare to try and guard for the other teams. And most teams, if you had one person on him, you were failing. If you had 2, you were probably failing. If you had 3, you probably still were failing. I mean, I have a picture of him with 4 people on him, and he still scored. So, we try and find those matchups and take advantage of them throughout the game.
Expectations can be a tricky thing. With success, a lot of times comes expectations that you're going to continue to win, and it is hard to win year in and year out, I can imagine. But do you have any teams that stand out in terms of what they did relative to expectations? Maybe like the team you played on, you said was the 7th seed in the Glasgow tournament. You guys ended up having a remarkable year. Do you think of teams that maybe overachieved their expectations?
A couple teams kind of stick out a little bit. Let me try and get this. The 2000, no, 13, 14. When Kennedy Davis and Hayden Hackman and Adam Monning were freshmen, we had just lost Reed Littrell, Ethan Thompson, Austin Stockhorse, Joel Monning, Jimmy Wilson, a really good class. And that group won 18 or 19 games. And I don't know if I expected it or they expected or anybody expected us to have that type of success that year. So that's one team that kind of sticks out in my mind. We're really kind of maybe overachieved. And the other one was the 23 team. We just, when we went to the Final Four, we had in 2021, the COVID year, we had won 4 games. And the 2022 year, we had won 16, had a better year. We were Class 2 at that time and lost to West Strand. We had the highest, you talk about districts earlier, we were the lowest seeded team in the state of Missouri. I looked at the brackets. We had a snow day one day, and I was kind of looking through. We had 16 wins, and no team that was a 6th seed in their district had 16 wins that year. I will say not all districts were filled out, so I wasn't able to check them all throughout there, but very few teams had 16 wins. So we improved that year. Then we come that next year, and Jordan Filmer comes to Glasgow that year. He had been at Higbee. He comes in, and we had a whole new team, basically. We had Idris Hamilton left. Jackson Meyer was a freshman. Jordan comes back. And there was some headaches along the way. You know, I had two kids that really wanted to be alphas, and we figured that out. Actually, the last game of the season, I was at halftime. I just told them, I said, look, guys, I've been thinking a lot about this, and I realized that we have 2 alphas on this team, Idris and Jordan, and they were both studs. They were really good, and they both wanted to be really good, and they both wanted to do great for the team. And sometimes they didn't always see eye to eye, at least in my opinion. Maybe not. Maybe that's not right. I don't know. But when we figured out that it was okay that those 2 were taking over, you know, one was taking over the other, and then we went on that run. So we came from a team with one person back, throwing them together. And I remember saying before the year, if we get through Christmas, we started rolling, and we did. We started really rolling and playing well, and it ended up being one of my favorite teams, really, because Idris was a ton of fun to coach all the way from the time he was 6th, 7th grade. He's a character. He is so funny and such a good player and such a big heart and wears his emotions on his sleeve. And then Jordan was really good. We had Preston Teese and Colton Boss were post players. Jackson Meyer was soft freshman that year. Zach Saylor was kind of you didn't see a lot of what he did, but he really was important to the team. And he was that way through his whole career. But so that 23, so it's a long way of saying that 23 team, I think, really kind of came out of nowhere. And we actually we beat Atlanta in the quarterfinals that year in Mobley. We lost to them by 50 that summer. Wow. So that really, and summer is summer. It is what it is. But 50 points is 50 points. So that was a team that I really think that I was super, super proud of that team for sure.
You bet. Now, I have this theory, and I don't have the experience you do by a long shot, but I've been around a few teams, some successful, some not. And it feels to me like the best teams tend to be player-led teams. Obviously, you need a good coach and thing like. But do you agree with that? And what are your thoughts?
You say that because that was kind of our mantra in 23. It was something along the lines of coach-led teams are good teams and player-led teams are great teams. That was and once you get into the postseason and it's loud, I'm fairly useless over there. I mean, during a game, they have to be able to manage their emotions, which is hard for kids. You know, I've learned that definitely in the last year with the golf, having a lot of success. But they've kind of got to go on their own, and they've got to do that. And sometimes we practice with the music loud, and we do communication drills and things of that throughout the year. But when the lights come on, it's a completely different situation, and to be able to make sure that your kids are doing what they need to do without you telling them what they need to do, it's huge. And whether it's practice, the games, it doesn't matter. It's huge.
Yeah, now I've got a few tough questions to ask, and I apologize in advance, but I think these people need to be remembered. But when I think about basketball at Glasgow, a few names come to mind that folks that were taken from us far too early, and I wanted to bring up, Adam Utlot. Yeah, he got through high school, but he died young, and Chad Cram, and then also Larry Schaefer. But I think of those three guys as basketball was a part of their lives, and they were taken from us far too soon. But if we want people to remember those three guys, do you have any stories about those three guys? Or
Well, I think when you say those three names, and I got goosebumps right now. The first thing I think about, and fortunately, we have some memories of them down, is Kimmel Park. That
absolutely,
is the first thing that comes to my mind, and it's basketball. We didn't play hardly any games in the summer through the school there. We played all the time at the park, all the time.
it'd be tough to play down there.
And those guys, I remember all three of them. That's a lot of their memories. Adam was a senior when I was a freshman. Chad was quite a bit younger than me, so I played a little with him at the park, but those are my memories of those guys. And Larry was just a year younger than me, and he was a really good player. And yeah, it's unfortunate that people don't remember, probably don't remember that he was a really, really good player. Could really shoot. But as far as Chad, we played a little bit here and there, and then Adam played quite a bit of ball with Adam. But all of them were very passionate about basketball. And the times are different now that you just don't play at the park anymore. But that was fun. That was a lot of fun. You got a lot better because there was no taking it easy on you at the park. I played with a lot of guys that just want to beat you into the ground and don't care about anything. And there's nothing fair about playing at the park usually. It's you got to be ready to be tough.
Well, that's what I remember about you. You changed my opinion on what it was to be a guard. Now you're older than I was, but going down there and watch. Usually, I was watching you guys play at that point, but you were not afraid to go inside there, and that was kind of dangerous to go inside with those big guys at the park, and they outweighed you by quite a bit, but you kept coming back. I remember that, not just shooting threes, you would go into the paint.
Yeah, the biggest thing I did when I played down at the park and what I learned was keep your mouth shut.
Yeah,
Play and keep your mouth shut and just play. And my dad told me a long time ago, don't hurt yourself patting yourself on the back. Let other people, talk about you. And I just kept my mouth shut and played. That was the main thing I did. If I got fouled, I didn't call it.
mm-mm.
I didn't call it. I just went to the other end and played defense. And that's what you had to do. And that's what generally got you some respect down there and got you on the court because there would be 25 people, and
That's
if you
right.
didn't get on the court, you weren't going to play. You just stand there.
That's right. Now, here's another really tough question. I posted something about this on Facebook a year ago, but with all the great players that have come through Glasgow, and you've seen a lot of them, some of them were before your time, but if you had to pick a handful of the best ever Yellow Jackets, who would you mention?
Well, I think Jay Lee has to be right there at the top of the list, 2,999 career points. And the funny thing is, I think 3,000 was something he wanted to do. And I kept telling him, hey, you got to quit missing these dunks. And, unfortunately, he came up 1 point shy. But, I mean, I took Jay to work out with Mizzou between his sophomore and junior year, I believe. And I remember thinking while I was watching him, like, he looks more comfortable playing with these guys than he does playing with us. And that's just kind of where his level was. He was my coaching at that time, and maybe even now, was not good enough to take full advantage of his talent. He was unbelievable. I remember one day we were working on press break drills, ball handling press break drills, getting ready for Harrisburg, and he's kind of going through the motions a little bit here and there. And I kind of got onto him a little bit. And then the next time he gets it, I mean, he just destroys everybody. He said, it's kind of like that. I said, exactly, exactly like that. So he was extremely talented and really a nice kid. And he's a really nice guy right now. I see Jay every once in a while. And I enjoy talking to Jay and have super excited, happy that I got the chance to be his coach for sure. I've had a couple here in the last couple of years. Jordan scored over 2,500 career points. Jackson Meyer scored over 2,000. Those guys are really good. Philip Normeyer scored 1,800 points, got him his junior and senior year. But there's, if you go back in time, uh, I didn't ever see Lawrence Butler. I didn't see Lawrence Butler, but obviously he's going to be there. He was a hear stories about him, incredible stories about how good he was, and see some pictures and some video, not a lot, but some video, and talk about how good he was. My dad was a good player, I think. He was all-state player, and in the six. And thing about those teams in the '60s and '70s were you didn't basically play till you were a senior. So there was lots of years like my dad didn't play as hardly as a junior, but all-state as a senior.
Wow.
His best friend was a junior, didn't play a lot as a junior, all-state as a senior. So there's the story of I think it's Dennis Hagedorn, who didn't start at Glasgow but started at CMU.
That's nuts.
So that the amount of talent you had, the Davis brothers that came through here. I don't want to leave anybody out, but we've had a lot of good players. But if you're talking like Jay and those type of guys, that's I guess you would say sort of the Mount Rushmore, I guess.
You bet. That's a heck of a list right there. And like you said, there's so many runners up. It's just incredible the history that we have here.
Yeah, and you think scoring, but I think of the teams that we've had, the guys that don't score a lot. I think of the guys that don't get to play a lot, who are instrumental in what we have to do day in and day out. And you can't. Your team is only as good as the chemistry of your 12th man. I mean, it's just truth. There's not everybody's going to get to play, and if that guy is bought into the team and he's there every day at practice, those are some of my favorite players, to be honest with you, who come every single day and are unselfish and put in as much work and then don't get to play as much. And it stinks, but that's kind of the way it is. And those are some of my favorite players through the years.
You bet. Like rebounding is important. Defense. Like who's the best defender you ever coached?
Oh, well, Jay and Jordan both were really good stealing a basketball. Zach Saylor, who I mentioned a little while, was really good. Chad Westhuse was a really good defender. He's the only person I ever had that could play front the post and give himself backside help while the lob was in the air.
That's impressive.
He was really good defensively. He was super strong. A lot of guys. We have played almost 99% man-to-man for 25 years, 24 years. So we've really just kind of just played. And, a lot of our defense, we don't even have like, a Gary Payton type glove guy a lot, but we have 5 guys that are committed to following the rules and following the fundamentals of man-to-man defense, and that makes us better. And a lot of times when we've been our best at defense, it's because we were patient on the offensive end. You don't get as many possessions, you can't score as much. Another guy that has moved on to coaching, who I also think that was really good for us in practice and super smart, and you probably could have seen it, as Jacob Bean. He's at New Franklin now. He was huge for that team, those teams in those years, because he was like another coach out there. He could take the second team in practice, and I could show them some stuff, and then he could run. He could help them run the other team's offense. He was really good at that, and has carried over to his coaching.
It's hard to talk about basketball in Missouri, especially smaller schools, without mentioning Scott County Central. And through the '80s, they were awesome. The '90s, and I think about that team you said with Jay Lee, they were amazing. But Scott County was just in another level. What do you know about Scott County?
Well, you talk about that team with Jay. I believe it's the '09 team. Their scouting report at that time was their point guard was named Bobby Hatchett. He was super springy and incredibly quick. Their off guard, their 2 guard, shooting guard was named Drew Thomas, and same way, just an incredible off the ball. And by the way, their third player on their scouting report is Otto Porter,
Right.
who ended up being the 3rd pick in the draft. So that's really kind of the where they were at that time. And I remember the 2012 year we played Scott County Central. I was calling, and at that time the video wasn't as good as it is now. I was calling schools and asking what they do against man. They say, "Oh, we don't play man against them." And I said, "Well, we only play man, so we're going to play man." And I remember that team was crazy because they were all about 5'11", and they all could play any position on defense. So they played a 1-2-2 full court press back to a 2-3. In one possession, a guy may be the top of the 1-2-2 and the top of the 2-3, or he may be the back of the 1-2-2 in the middle of the 2-3. It didn't matter. Just wherever they ended up after offense is where they generally ended up on defense. So that was crazy to me, to be so versatile and good at everything you do. Their competition level, that whole area down south, is really kind of a different beast. It really is. I think the 2012 team had like 10 or 11, 12 losses
Right.
coming in the Final Four, and they dominated the Final Four. So they've got a incredible rich history, just like we do, and they've had some really good teams come through there.
It feels like one of those, at least one of those years that we beat when you were coaching. We beat, I think it was Harrisburg, maybe bit the 2A champion. We were 1A at the time, and it was a close game, but we beat them. But then we got whooped by Scott County. There have been years where it's been easier to be a 2 or 3A coach probably than a 1A coach. Is that a true statement?
I don't know about easier, but I mean, it's hard to know how teams are going to match up. But that year, I believe it was 2000. It was 2008. I mean, Ryan Haskamp was a junior on that team that year, and Harrisburg was 27-3, something like that, and lost to, I believe, Lynn and us twice, and won a state championship. And then we got second in Class 1, and Ryan Haskamp said second in Class 1, first in Class 2, which is not you still had to win the game, but it was just kind of a funny little thing.
And was it Principia this last year, if I'm pronouncing that right, that just destroyed everybody, even at the state, like beat teams bad in the Final Four? And to me, it's unusual that you see a team like whoop a team that bad in the Final Four. What was their secret sauce?
They had a lot of good players that were brought in.
Oh, I figured that was what it was.
And their coach was at Webster Groves for several years. He's a really good coach, and I don't really know him personally. I mean, we wouldn't know each other necessarily, but I've watched a lot of him because when we were when Mizzou used to have team camp, and Webster Groves would always be there. Their kids always worked hard. They're fundamental. They're polite. He does a really good job, and he did not want to be in Class 3 this year. He just didn't want to. He wanted to be in Class 6 because, he said that it's not fair. It's not fair. I mean, they had a kid that scored as many points in the 2 games as the other 2 teams they played.
Wow.
Combined. And he's going to Illinois now, I believe, next year. Yeah, they really put on a show. Another guy that student taught for me, Brock Idris, is at Monroe City now, and they played them in the sectionals, and it was like 77 to 18 or something. And I talked to Brock, and he said, I'm just hoping to win 1 minute. Well, then I talked to him the next night, and I asked him if he won a minute. He said, I don't think so. He sent me the film, and I watched a little bit, and it was 32-0 before they scored, and I turned it off. I texted him back. I said, hey, when I turned it off, you were on a 2-0 run, so that's all that mattered.
Yep. So it feels like the sports environment has changed over the year from back when we played. I remember summer times. We'd go to a couple team camps, but now you can do some organized things over the summer, right? Are the rules different now than they used to be?
Well, as a player, I didn't really know the rules, but I know as I was about a sophomore or a junior is when summer stuff really kind of started to get started. I don't remember playing much before that, so it really kind of gets started. Now you have 20 contact days to use, whether for practice, anything like that. Now weights aren't considered contact days, things of that nature. But so you have 20 contact days where you can basically be like you are in the regular season. And then 7 weeks before the season starts, actually 8 weeks because the week right before is dead, you can have contact with your kids hour and a half a week. And you can kind of break that, or maybe it's 3 hours. I think it's 3 hours a week. You can break that up however you want. You can go 1.5 hours twice. You can go, 45 minutes, whatever, to get you your 3 hours. So you can do that as well. It's like a preseason thing, and that's each sport. Each season has that. So before the fall season, the fall season's kind of the summer, and then before the winter season, it starts right around Labor Day, and then the spring season, it starts right after Christmas break. You get 7 weeks of contact that you can have. But for small schools, it's harder because all my basketball players are playing baseball in the fall, or a lot of them are, and I don't really want to interrupt that and take over that. And then, the baseball players and the golfers are playing basketball. So in a small school, we don't use it as much, I don't think, as probably the bigger schools do.
Yeah, that makes sense. So do you think that the players today, the teams today, are better than they were back when you played or before? Like, if the great teams that you played on were to play against your team from last year, would it be a good game? Or the fact that they get to play more organized ball through the summer, would that make them better? Or what are your thoughts?
I think that's a good question, and I really am not sure, to be honest with you. I think it would be interesting. It's kind of like, are the early '90s Bulls as good as the Warriors, were a few years ago? Is Michael Jordan better than LeBron James? He is, by the way. Anyway,
Agreed.
it's just hard to say how it would go. I think the basketball is different now. I mean, obviously, with the 3-point line and even my first year coaching junior high basketball at Glasgow in 2002, I didn't allow 3-pointers from the junior high kids.
Really?
Yeah,
From you, that's
yeah.
impressive because you like to shoot the three.
And I just thought that too many of them are just launching it instead of actually shooting it. And so, and even just I'm not as opposed to early 3-pointers at this point in my career as I was earlier. And I don't know, maybe that's me getting old and soft. I don't know, but I just think that the game has changed.
Yeah, it has, no doubt. So switching gears a little bit, how has the summer program changed with all the summer activities that are more organized than they used to be? It felt like growing up when Littoral was running it, and I know you were a participant, that there were over 100 kids and it was always busy. It was hard to find room for all the kids on the baseball field for Little League. That's different now, isn't it?
Yeah, it's different. I think there's less kids, for one. I think there's less kids. Travel ball impacts our youth program here at Glasgow. This is my 27th year doing the youth program, and but I'm super happy that it's there
Hmm.
and it's allowed, and it's for the kids here that can't or don't want to participate in something more structured and not necessarily structured, but I don't even say more organized, because we're organized where we are. We're more recreation than competitive, and they maybe don't want to be in more of a competitive nature. It gives them something to come, and we have. I have enough for 2 softball teams, 2 baseball teams, and those kids are super excited to play games. We have game tonight, our first game tonight. They're excited to play, and we do pickleball, and they're super excited to come down and play pickleball. And I love the fact that there's something for those kids to do, because once they get to 12, that's not there anymore. And I have parents all the time tell me, my kid's just sitting at home doing nothing. I wish there was something for them to do. So I'm glad we have this for them to do from the time they're 8 to 12.
Yeah, you bet, for sure. So you probably don't get much downtime. But I know you're a family man. When you do get downtime and you're not coaching and you're not busy, how do you like to spend your downtime?
Yeah, man, I just like I said, I like to watch TikTok for old people, Facebook Reels. I like to cook. I do a lot of cooking.
Really?
Yeah, I love to cook, and just kind of, being a homeowner is kind of a job in itself. My wife works in Columbia, so she drives to and from every day. So, when she gets home, we like to just eat and hang out, and just got 2 kids, one in college, one in high school, and then another one that works out here at the school, Caitlin, and my she's a nurse out to school, and then my daughter Annika is going to be a senior and be ready to be a early education teacher. She's going to be a great teacher. My son Andrew is going to be a senior, and I've coached him and everything from the time he was old enough to walk, and he's on a basketball team. He was an all conference and all district golfer last year. He was an all conference baseball player. So just just kind of hang out, relax, and Jason, I go to bed pretty early.
There's
So
nothing wrong with that. But man, you must be proud of your kids.
yeah, they are. The unfortunate thing, I think, for my kids is that I have spent so much time coaching other kids, and unfortunately, a lot of times I come home and I don't want anything to do with a sport, and so I think in that nature they've kind of had to take the back seat, and I hate that's kind of been the way it is, that I've spent so much time coaching other people's kids that I haven't got enough chance to coach my kids. But they're great kids, all 3 of them. All are successful, are going to be very successful. So I feel like we've done something right.
Absolutely, you have. Now, how many years did your mom teach?
No, I have no idea. Hold
Man,
on.
and
Over
she
30.
impacted a lot of people.
Over
She was
30. Yeah,
great at it.
she taught over 30, and then when she retired, she came back and taught some keyboarding to elementary kids. And so now she's been retired for several years and doing really well.
And as I understand, your sister still lives in mid-Missouri somewhere. How's Lindsay doing?
Yep, she does. She works or she lives in Ashland, and she lives there. 3 kids as well. They're all our older kids are about the same age, and then she has a younger one that just turned 9. So, she's doing very well.
Well, that's excellent to hear. Now we're about to wrap up here, but I got to hit you with one more tough question here. What's your prediction for the upcoming basketball season?
Well, I think we're going to be pretty competitive. Like I said, we've got 12 juniors and seniors that really have been in the program for several years, and there was one comment that I got from a coach this summer was we just flow so well in our offense, and I think I take for granted how easily they can just get into things, and they kind of remind me a little bit. I don't think I'll have as many coaches come from this group, but that 2012 team, I remember playing in a championship of the Marceline tournament, and I just sat on a bench most of the game. Remember, I got 4 future coaches on this team. And after the game, my dad asked me, "Are you sick? Are you okay?" I said, "Yeah, I'm fine." He's like, "Well, you didn't do much." I said, "I don't need to do a lot. They know what they're doing." And and this team's kind of like that. They really just kind of flow on their own and kind of do a lot of things. And so I'm looking forward to coaching that. They work hard. They're coachable. And that's one thing I've always told my kids specifically, and I want other kids to be coachable, work hard, and be a good teammate. And I think those guys, we're gonna have upwards of 24, 25 kids on the 9 through 12, and they're coachable. They work hard, and they're good teammates. And that's been true for at least for sure the last several years, if not most years that we've been here. So as far as wins and losses, I think if we do those things, they'll kind of take care of themselves.
Very good. Well, thank you, Coach Cropp, for joining us today. It's been a pleasure to have you on. Good luck this season and all of your future endeavors. You have been hot dipped.
All right. Thanks a lot, Jason.
You bet.
Appreciate it.
Thank you for watching Hot Dipped. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click on that notification bell for future episodes.